Good afternoon, and welcome to the Virginia Bar Association's quarterly practice management advisor webinar. I'm Paul Fletcher. I am the executive director of the Virginia Bar Association, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's program, which is how to better manage your workload with email management. And as always, we have our friends from Affinity Consulting here to provide the information. Jeff Schoenberger, who many of you have known and met, is our presenter today. And I will say, Jeff, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Let me go ahead and share my screen here and we'll get started. So I really like talking about this topic because email is absolutely one of the biggest and sort of most prominent things that we deal with as attorneys and as legal professionals. And although there are some ways that we could use it a little bit less based on some other tools that we could talk about, if you want to throw something in the chat that I have up, we do spend a ton of time dealing with email. And as always, everything I've got on the screen, as well as some supplementary materials, are available. So don't feel like you have to write frantically as I go through slides. I always like to mention that when we're doing these webinars, we've got great resources that we update at least monthly on the bar's website. And you have the option of also, scheduling time with me or one of our great colleagues to talk about, tech, law, office management, anything like that. It is a service of the bar, so feel free to take advantage of that. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with, how we're handling our workload, what sort of pressures we're seeing. And then we're really going to dive in, talk a little bit about some setting changes you can make to Outlook specifically, although a lot of what we talk about is available also in, say, Gmail, if you are a firm that uses Google Workspace as opposed to Microsoft 365. So a lot of the things we talk about are available there as well. A few favorite add-ins, and then a couple of, again, Outlook specific tips and tricks, but the core of the idea is available in other programs as well. So a lot of times when I think about email management and what I have to get done and where I need to go to find out what I need to get done, it kind of feels like this. Like I get some things going, I keep one client happy for a little bit, and then I got to go deal with another client, and I got to run over here and run over there and run over back and forth. And it's not your imagination if it feels like it's gotten worse, especially if you are a smaller firm. And so, maybe you're attorney heavy and attorneys do some of the work that a larger firm would hand off to paralegals or administrative support. There are more people who think you are available and that they can reach out to you and ask you things and request things at all times than there have ever been before. So it is not your imagination. Microsoft has done a bunch of research on this. They, of course, are interested in making sure that businesses are running well, but profitable businesses will buy more software from them, of course. What they have found is that there are about 2 to 3 minute external interruptions that you could have. So you could be picking up your phone, the email icon in your taskbar or your dock could change, pop up, new message, or God forbid you still have it play a sound every time an email comes in. I admire your determination, I suppose, but it's probably past time to turn that off. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then they found out that depending on what sort of interruption you have, the average interruption lasts about 15 minutes. So, you get distracted by one thing that pops up on the phone, and then you're like, then you go down the rabbit hole of what's going on. If you have, this average of 15 minutes per interruption, and you have 4 of these an hour, where did your time go? That whole hour is just kind of gone. It's amazing. And when we think about, what we do as attorneys, and, depending on whether you're on the billable hour or your contingent or flat fee, your time, whether you're doing it billing for it directly, and obviously your time is what you're selling. Unless you've got some really great systems in place that help you, offload that or automate a bunch of it, you're still selling a lot of your time. So what these researchers at Microsoft did to get this statistic is they watched people for 29 hours in a typical office, found they were interrupted about 4 times per hour, and then the average for that length of the interruption was 15 minutes. So if you're above average, your day might just be horrendous. If you're below average, you might actually get a lot more done. In this case, it's one of those situations where it benefits to be below average. And then one of the most interesting things that they found when they talk about, you're interrupted an average of 4 times per hour. To be interrupted, it means you were doing something, you're working or whatever, and then you get interrupted. They found that after the interruptions, some enormous number, in fact, 40% of people never returned to the task that they were interrupted from doing. Like, 20, they watched these people for 20 hours, interrupted an average of 4 times an hour. If that person was interrupted, 40% of those interruptions never got back to the original task they were doing. It's just kind of mind-boggling. But then, you think, well, I probably have, maybe 4 or more interruptions an hour. What sort of things count as interruptions? On average, folks were checking social media 21 times a day. That could be everything from LinkedIn, which you might argue is business building, to Facebook, to Twitter or Instagram, or if you're young enough, or maybe if you're just hip enough, TikTok or something like that. There were 74 email checks a day. So that means people not just, had 74 emails a day, they could have had a ton more, but that they actively turned over or brought up their email program as their primary thing 74 times a day. 80 smartphone checks a day. So I think you can probably do this on Android, but I know you can do it on iOS. If you go into settings on iOS and you go to screen time, you can while your way in there and you can figure out how many times a day you pick up your cell phone. So if I bring mine up, I'm just looking down here to see, I go screen time in the settings area, and then I click on see all apps and activities, scroll down a bit. I'm averaging, today I'm at 70. My average is about 113. I did a talk similar to this last week for some folks in Illinois in their solo small firm conference. And I asked the room, like, how many people or what are your numbers? And I got everything from, I think, 42 to 225. So 80 seems about right if you average it out. Just picking up the phone and doing something with it about 80 times a day. Put all this together, you're flipping back and forth between things from email to social media to try and get back to a task, et cetera, et cetera. 564 switches a day. It's exhausting, which Microsoft calculated works out to about a 40% productivity loss for a firm, for a business. This was for general business. This wasn't law firm specific, but 40% lost productivity. So we obviously have some stuff that we can improve here. And one of the benefits would be that you don't have to spend as much time working. You don't have to be as stressed. And if then you want to spend time on TikTok, there's probably some time available for that. Just a little bit about time management styles, and then we're going to dive directly into email. So I don't really feel strongly about how you track your tasks. If you like paper, if you like something electronic, if it works for you, that's great. What I don't like, and I'll talk about the reasons here in a minute, is that you rely on your inbox as your task list. Your inbox can be a source of things that go on the list of things that you need to do for clients or for the business, but it is not the primary place that you should be going. So you probably have something that might work a little bit well for you now. If that works, that's great. You can do something fancy like an iPad there on the left with one of the programs that lets you write on it with a pencil. You could use any number of different things. There are kind of like 4 or 5 basic strategies for tasks. There's just like a list. There's the Kanban style, so you could move it between different categories, like sort of like swimming lanes in a pool. If you do that. There's calendar time blocking, or there's scheduling. There are several different ways. And if you want some more information, just shoot me an email. We can talk about it. But I'm not here to tell you one way is the right way. The point is to have a trusted place that you take something that you need to do for somebody and you put it there so that when you need to work on something, you don't have to wonder out, think in your mind or, pick from what's in the email, what did I write down on my notepad, what did I put in a to-do reminder on my iPhone? No, you want one place to go. And if it's paper, again, like I said, that's fine for me. I wouldn't do paper for calendaring, but I would be fine if you just like, because paper actually works for me. I have a tracking system that's electronic that we use for the whole company. And then for the stuff I want to get done today, I write them out on an index card and I set it right in front of me. I don't have to like switch back to the program. I don't have to flip to a page in a book. I don't have to do anything like that. But I've got the electronic record for all the things I have to do. And then the 4 or 5 things that are today's items, I just have on paper right in front of me. And so here's an example. This is from a couple of years ago. I used a very basic scheduling. I didn't put in like for the VBA there, I don't have the Zoom link. I'm not going to write that out. But then I get the big 3 that I wanted to do for that day on top left, and then some other things that came up that I need to put into the electronic system. But that's always nice because it's right there. And then as long as I make sure that I add it into the system that we're using for the whole company, it works well. And so that's what I do. What works for you is great, as long as, again, we're not relying on your task list being whatever emails someone throws at you. So if you're thinking about changing up your task management system, I'm happy to talk to you about that. These are kind of the big features that I would think of if you're looking at an electronic version. So, if you're using Gmail, you're going to get some work through that. So someone's going to send you an email, ask you to do something. If you're using Gmail, you want a program that's going to talk to you, let you pull emails out of Gmail and put them in the task program. If it talks to Outlook but not Gmail, that's not the right fit for you. I almost guarantee that you'll want something that's going to show up on your iPhone or your Android. If you're more than just a solo, if you've got paralegal support, receptionists, other legal professionals, you might want to be able to have something that the whole team can see and that you can assign tasks to people. If you're a true solo, you don't need that. Same thing with sharing lists, and then sorting and filtering come with most of the programs. But again, depending on how specific you like to be, that might be something to check out. But obviously, lots of problems with just email, because of course, the biggest one being that anyone can send you email unless you've made some effort to block their email address. It's like being, like throwing anything they want over the transom, and boom, it pops into your inbox, and then you gotta deal with it. It's also distracting because if you're working out of your inbox, as new things come in, it's gonna, even if you don't have it make noise and you don't have the doc icon or the taskbar icon light up, it's just going to show up in that top list, and it's going to be blue or bold or whatever it does for your program when it comes in. But ultimately, it's about the fact that you don't get to control what falls on that list. And so if you need to concentrate, you don't want to have that thing open. So it's fine that work comes in through email. Of course, it's going to come in through email, but then you want something that's going to get it out of the email into something as simple as a list, any number of programs. We'll talk about a couple here, but it is not your inbox. Your inbox is not your task list. That's a recipe for distraction. It's akin to those 224 phone pickups. Like every time something comes in, you get distracted. Let's talk a little bit about things that you might have to spend some money on if you're not already. And then we'll end with some tips and tricks that'll get us through to making what we already pay for a little bit better. Most law firms that we see, whether it's true solo, small firm up to larger firms, they're pretty much on Microsoft Exchange, and they're pretty much anymore, at least on the law firm side, renting that through Microsoft 365. So we'll talk about a couple of the options here in just a minute. But if I gave this talk to you, I don't know, probably 10 years ago, I would say that you should absolutely not use Google. You should instead use Microsoft. And I might even make an argument that in some cases, you might want to have your own mail server. I would not make either of those arguments today. I think it's perfectly fine if you want to use Google Workspace. There are a couple of things to think about in that regard, but generally speaking, will work perfectly well. And I would not recommend that any law firm, unless, I don't know, if you're doing something ridiculously confidential and you have the people on staff to maintain the email server, you would have to really convince me that you should run your own email server. Obvious benefits for Microsoft Exchange or Google Workspace, if you want to go that route. You can share your contacts, calendar, email with others very easily within the firm. Syncs wirelessly, updates everywhere. So if you read an email on the phone, it shows up red on Outlook or on Gmail. They're taking care of the backup, so you're not thinking about that. And of course, you get both desktop program access if you like that, you get phone access, and you get web access. The two, if you're kind of in the Gmail camp, the Google Workspace camp, let me tell you before I go on to more details about Microsoft 365. Let me just tell you a couple of things about what you want to think about if you're thinking that route or you're already down that route. One is that if you're looking at law practice management software, which I highly recommend for firms, you want to make sure that when they say it integrates with your email, so you can save emails into it, that it integrates with Gmail. Virtually all of them integrate with Microsoft 365, so you're probably good there. A smaller number, but many high quality ones, including like Clio, Rocket Matter, Carrot Legal, top ones will integrate with Gmail, but it is not. It's not. We integrate with email, therefore you can assume they mean both Outlook and Gmail. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about it. And the other thing to think a little bit about is that, and maybe some of you have had this experience when you've received invites or someone, possibly clients, have responded to invites and they're on Gmail or they're on Google Calendar. The responses in the meeting invites look a little bit different. They work perfectly well. It's just a different appearance and to me, it looks a little more cluttered than the Outlook email, like meeting acceptances and stuff. So keep that in mind. But absolutely, the big one is if you're going to do Gmail, make sure the law practice management program you're using talks to it. A lot of great ones do. It's just not a one-to-one email equals both of those. So Microsoft 365 now. Microsoft has several different ways that you can get into this, and you can spend a little money up to a lot of money. If you're looking for something in the business realm, we probably don't want to be thinking about family or personal. I think if you were literally a true solo, you could probably do personal. I would not, as a business, try to do family. If you ever have some sort of issue or concern, Microsoft's going to look a little askance at you. So what we're mainly talking about there is that center tier there. Do we want business basic, which is $6? Do we want business premium, or do we want something in the middle? Bottom set there, the E stands for enterprise. Don't think that you have to be a large firm to go on enterprise. Just think, do I want the features that they're talking about there? And as far as the law office is concerned, the biggest feature benefit on one of those enterprise plans is that they have a very nice way of doing email encryption. So we're not going to get into ethical rules today, but if you want to be able to very easily, send a client, say, a psychological evaluation, if you're family law, and you want to send a psychological evaluation of a child to somebody, I wouldn't do that over just email. I wouldn't just write an email and attach the PDF and send it off. I would not do that. So you'd want to send it encrypted or provide some sort of encrypted password protected link. You want to encrypt the whole email. The E tier of plans includes some very, very nice, very easy to use features that basically, since they work at the server level as opposed to being an add-in for your email program, means that you get to define a keyword. And let's say the keyword is encrypted. If you put that keyword in the subject line of the email, then whether you send it from your phone, whether you send it from the website, whether you send it from the desktop app, nowhere from your iPad, doesn't really matter. Your device is securely connected to Microsoft Server. Microsoft Server receives that email and says, oh, the magic keyword is in that subject line. I'm going to encrypt that email, send it on to its response to the recipient, and then the recipient has to decrypt it, and Microsoft makes that very straightforward for the recipient. If you don't need that level of complexity, it's probably unlikely that you need to be in the East tier of plans. If you don't want to pay the difference in price, the email encryption tool I would look at is probably, I think it's called Delivery Trust. There are several out there. Identelect is the one that I know I'm most familiar with, and it's a literal add-in for Gmail or for Outlook, but then doing it on the phone would be a little bit more complex. So depends on your needs there. Of these three tiers of plans, the ones that include email hosting, so Microsoft hosts your email, 3 of the 4 business plans and all of the enterprise plans have it. If you want the desktop apps, whether for Mac or for PC, you get a slightly different arrangement of plans. The Business Basic does not have the desktop application. So Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, the things that you think of as Office, that I think of as Office. Business Basic is just Microsoft hosting your email. And of course, if you want Exchange and the apps, so you want the desktop apps that we think of as Office and you want Exchange, you're down to $12.50, $22 per person, or one of those enterprise plans. And again, for most of you, I would expect you would probably want to start at either the standard or the premium, and then decide if you need to go up to one of the enterprise tier. And again, enterprise doesn't mean large organization. It means I want the features that just happen to be classified in that tier of plan. And again, I've got the chat up. If you got any questions as we're going through, feel free to throw them in there. There are a couple of different ways that, and we'll talk about them, that you can organize email. The most emails I ever saw in an attorney's inbox, I want to say it was about 100,000, and he was complaining that Outlook was slow. So that is not the way to do it, apart from the fact that even if Outlook has great search, and it's got pretty good search, you're never going to be able to dig in and make any sense of that. It's just essentially like a scrap heap. It might be the case if you're interested in Copilot, which is Microsoft's AI tool. It might be that Copilot could go through and find something for you and make some sense of it, but we talked about all these plans here. Let me go back one. Those plans are for email hosting and the Microsoft apps that we think of. If you want to add the AI, and we'll have a little bit of time, I'll show you a couple of things in Outlook that take advantage of Copilot. And I believe we have a webinar in maybe on the site that you can access, where we did a whole bunch of Copilot stuff earlier this year, I think, maybe, or last year. Those prices go up to an additional $20 or $30 per person per month if you want to add Copilot to an individual user's plan. So you're not looking at $12.50, you're looking at something like either $32.50 or $42.50, and same thing for the other 4 on that screen. So Copilot has some nice stuff, including some nice stuff for Outlook and for Teams, but it's not free. So a few things that you can do. We'll start with the simplest stuff and we'll move up a little bit from there. Obviously, you can create folders under your inbox or in the mail program and drag them over. You got to be, that's something that you have to do. Honestly, I don't do that. What I do instead is that we either have a place that we're filing them as for the company, and I'll talk about those options here in a minute that you could use for the firm, or everything, or the things that don't make it into that go into just a general archive. So they're out of the inbox. They've gone to whatever task tracking to-do list type program I'm using. B, if it's something that we have a policy on, that we save it into our document management system, I do that. And then 3, it just goes into the archive. It gets out of the inbox. You can create individual folders for clients or matters, but I don't really think that's the best way to go about it. The strongest argument I've heard for that is that it would be the most accessible no matter what device you used. So create a folder inside your email. It's going to be on your phone. It's going to be on the web. It's going to be on your iPad. It's going to be wherever. And so you can probably guarantee you have access to it. But beyond that, it's time consuming and it's kind of annoying. You can, of course, save emails outside of the email program. So instead of having to open Outlook or to, go to the Gmail website, you could save them. If it's an Outlook message, you can save it as an MSG file. There's also an EML file. And it's just a standalone file. You double click on it, it actually opens Outlook first, and then it opens the email. And so it'll look like the email, but it's saved as an external file that you could, put into a folder on OneDrive that you could save into your document management system that you could do whatever you want with. The Apart from the time commitment required to do it, like, file save kind of thing, the other downside is that it's possible that file format eventually goes away. I think that's kind of unlikely, but I did want to throw it out there. The reason I think it's unlikely is if there are all these people who do it, somebody's going to write a program that reads those files. Even if anytime Microsoft sunsets something, you're still talking about like probably 10 years before they stop doing it, much less before some third party ceases to support it. Like today, you can still buy and actually use as a full-fledged product. You can still buy and use WordPerfect. Do most people do that? Absolutely not. But you are not for want of options to read your WordPerfect files, even though it's very, very small number of people use it anymore. So there's that possibility. I think this is, again, time consuming. And so I don't particularly like that option. One of the options, and we'll talk about it in detail in just a little bit, that I do like is that you can, most of the PDF programs, and this is kind of specific to Windows, most of the PDF programs that you run on Windows put a ribbon in Outlook. So if you're paying for Adobe Acrobat, you get a ribbon that says Adobe Acrobat in Outlook. And same thing if you're using Foxit or it says Nuance there, but it's now Kofax Power PDF or Nitro PDF. They can save like entire folders of emails together. So once a matter is finished, you could save all the emails from that. You could, assuming it's reasonably number of email addresses, search for those email addresses, move all of those to a folder, and then have the PDF integration with Outlook, save all of those emails as one giant PDF, and it would grab, assuming we set it up in the way that it would do it, it would grab the attachments too. And so it's essentially one folder in Outlook becomes one usually kind of large PDF. And that's all the communications, or at least all the email communications that happened on that matter. And notice I said, you could file them one at a time if you wanted. And I'll show you a way that you can set up a little bit of a quick step to make that happen. But again, you could also search when matter is concluded, search for the people involved in the matter or the email addresses, the domain, whatever, do that search, drag all those from the search into a folder, turn that folder into that giant PDF. So here's what Acrobat's integration looks like. You get the option of converting individual messages, and you could, click, control click on 2 or 3 of them, turn those into PDFs. You could select folders to turn into PDFs. So that's kind of a good option if you want something that's based in Outlook, kind of works with what you're already in dealing with email, and presuming you have already signed up for Acrobat or one of the other PDF programs out there, you've already paid for this functionality. So this is a no-cost thing. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but their help manual should be pretty straightforward on it. If it's not, just go through the BAR's website, schedule some time. Any of the folks on the advisor can help you out and get that going for you. This is the option I kind of like best, especially if you are already using a law practice management product. And assuming, I think most attorneys should. There are a few cases where I would say no, but in the cases I would generally say no, it's either a true solo. So no virtual assistant, no receptionist, no paralegal, no nothing, no contractors, just literally a true solo. Or it's someone who is highly technical and has probably fallen asleep at this point anyway. So for most attorneys, I would recommend that you have law practice management software. As I said, lots of great ones out there. I'm sure the bar has deals with several of them. Usually it's like somewhere around 10 or 15% off for your, at least, it might be for at least the first year, maybe more than that. But all of these up here have email integration, at least with Microsoft 365. I know Clio will do Gmail. I know I'm pretty confident Rocket Matter and Carrot Legal in my case will. Not so sure about Cosmolex, Smokeball, and Practice Panther, but they will all, I know they all do email, calendar, and contact integration with Microsoft 365. So what's the advantage of putting your emails into this? Well, again, we're saying you're not a true solo. So you've got someone else, whether someone else in the office or you've hired one of these from one of these virtual services, many of which are really great. They would be able to access the email and the case info along with the case information. And so you, as maybe the attorney, you don't want to give access to your email for someone else to file it or to find it. And you don't particularly want to be bothered on vacation when someone's looking for a particular email or a file attached to an email. Putting them in the central place where everyone in the firm goes is probably the best solution. So that's the way to go, I would say, for most folks who are in a typical firm practice. Most of the add-ins that come and integrate with your email will also let you put time against emails. So it takes you as an attorney time to respond to emails, to draft it, to read it, that's billable time, or at the very least, even if you're not billing by the hour, it should be recorded at least, say quarterly or so. Do a test, because even if you're doing flat fees, you want to see how long it takes you to provide the service. That gives you an idea of whether you're charging the right amount. So it's good to track, especially, obviously if you're being billed hourly, you track every email that you do, but even if you're not being billed hourly, it gives you an idea of what goes on, how long things take, how fast you're moving through a particular matter. A lot of other great features in these practice management programs, but focusing on the email one, I think that's the strongest argument in favor of getting one of these. This is what it looks like. This is the older Outlook. We'll talk about what's going on with Outlook here in a minute. But this is for Clio. They all work pretty much the same. I have an email up here on the screen, and there are 3 buttons on the toolbar, and I can file the email. I can smart file. So Clio, this was even before we would use AI all the time. So this is before we would, if they made this, if they redo the app, it probably won't say smart file, it'll probably say AI file, because that way they can raise some additional capital by using the magic word. Smart file kind of tries to guess based on what else you have filed, where it might belong. It generally does pretty good. So assuming you don't, if one client takes up 50% of your business, I have working with someone now who does that, whose 50% comes from one company. So smart file might not work super great for them, but assuming that's not your situation, it does a pretty good job of guessing. And then of course, as you see on the right, you can add time to an individual email. And that way you can figure out, how long did it take me to respond, record that so that you have an idea of what's going on from the business. And they, like I said, they all work pretty much the same. This is Clio, I'm sure Rocket Matter. Smokeball might look a little bit different because Smokeball is a more comprehensive desktop program. Its integrations are tighter with Word and Excel and Outlook than most of the web-based programs, just by virtue of the way Smokeball is designed. So theirs might be a little bit different, but the other ones out there beyond that, the exclusively web-based ones work pretty much like this. And then for larger firms, the option would be a true document management system. NetDocs and iManage. OpenText, I think, is another one out there, but these are probably the 2 I would start with. They don't work terribly differently than what you see with the Clio add-in. There are a couple of ways they're different. One, I think their smart filing is probably going to be a little bit better. And 2, they can create folders in the folder list on the left-hand side. And so instead of just creating a folder in Outlook like we talked about a while back, they can actually create what are essentially placeholders. So you drag that email into that placeholder file folder, and instead of it just being saved in a folder in Outlook, it is actually written to the document management system. So if it doesn't bother you to go through the step of filing it in Outlook, this is probably an improvement, because filing it in Outlook is just going to trap it in an Outlook folder that only you have access to. Whereas again, not a true solo, you got other people in the firm, they would be able to see what you're putting into NetDocs and iManage in the same way they'd be able to see what you put into Clio or Rocket Matter or one of those other products. And then, as I mentioned, I don't use Outlook as a task list, and I recommend you don't either. Same thing with Gmail. I'm not picking on Outlook. I wouldn't use email at all as a task list. If you're in the Microsoft sphere, you have at least 3 ways that they are happy for you to turn emails into tasks. The one on the left is the one that will eventually phase out. That is Outlook tasks. Outlook tasks have been around with us for probably 20 years. Outlook was created in 1997, and I think tasks either came then or very shortly after. So gosh, maybe only almost 30 years. Microsoft is in the middle of redoing Outlook. So if you've been updating your Windows PC, you'll notice you have an Outlook Classic, Outlook and then Classic in parentheses, and then you have an Outlook, I think it's New in parentheses, and they're trying to move folks to the new Outlook. There are a number of advantages to it. One being that it looks more like a mobile app, it looks more like a web app, it probably works better in those regards. But it looks sufficiently different that it will annoy and has annoyed a bunch of people who are responsible for training inside companies, because Outlook is used by huge organizations. And so it's a very slow transition, but they will eventually phase out Outlook tasks. The replacement for Outlook tasks, which you can use now, and if you're on the Mac, it's really kind of your only option in Outlook at this point, is Microsoft To Do. It is a list-based planner. So it's just, you create a list, you add things to it. You can make due dates, you can have relative due dates, you can add documents, you can share lists. And To Do is actually free. You don't even have to pay Microsoft for it. You do need to have like a Microsoft account, in the sense that, like, if you have an iPhone, you almost certainly have an Apple ID, even if you don't ever do anything with it. But you don't have to pay them. You can use To Do for free. And it's got it's web-based, it's built into the new Outlook, and there are mobile apps, iPad apps, Android apps, all that sort of stuff. Third option, if you want to go something a little bit more complex, is Planner, and that's available through a Microsoft 365 business or greater subscription. So if you were the person that I said maybe you could use Outlook Personal, Microsoft 365 Personal, if you were a true solo, you wouldn't get Planner. So if Planner is interesting to you, you're going to have to go on the business side. Planner is essentially, it is a Kanban style, or it can be a Kanban style way of looking at your tasks, meaning that at the top row, you have, say, newly hired. So someone who's just being onboarded into the firm as a client. And then you have, maybe if you're an estate planning firm, then you have first interview, and then the next column is document collection, and the third column is drafting, and the fourth column is waiting for client to review your drafts, and then maybe the next column is revising, and so forth, and then eventually you get to the signing ceremony for the estate plan. Planner has all of the sharing kind of capabilities that we talked about with To Do, but it is mostly web-based. It's not as good as some of the other Kanban type programs out there. If you're interested in that sort of column-based approach to tracking your tasks, I would also look at Todoist. I would look at Trello. They will integrate with Outlook, and I think pretty sure they'll integrate with Gmail too. And I think they do a better, stronger job of the Kanban. Advantage of Planner is it's living in your Microsoft environment. It is included with what you're paying. If you start to get into the Copilot stuff, to have Copilot, rely on the material that it has access to from you to help you write, to help you do these other things, Planner is going to be in that environment in a way that Todoist, that Trello are not going to be in that environment. So that's one of the big benefits for it. So you can have plans. So you could say, we've got the Smith estate plan, and then you can have those columns, and you can create templates. It's just, if you really like that, there are a couple of other alternatives that are probably stronger, but they cost money. And if you're thinking about AI from Microsoft, they're going to be outside that for now. So a few email storage tips. I think you should treat email as like you would have treated letters, like you would treat, and really honestly ought to be treating text messages and instant messages, and kind of outside the bounds of this seminar. But there are a couple of ways you can do that with text messages, but it's part of the communications, part of the file. It needs to be stored there. I think the easiest way is either to do that, again, that search at the end when the matter's over, make that PDF, to rely on the one of the add-ins for your practice management program or for your document management program. Those are probably the easiest ways to make sure that it is in the right place and other people in the firm can access it. I go back and forth about after you file it, delete it. I would certainly, after you file it or after you put it on your task management program or your task management list, whatever that is, and that it goes out of the inbox. Like I told you at the beginning of our time together, I throw everything after it gets into the place that other people get to see it and need it and want it. It goes into an archive. So you get, as a Microsoft 365 subscriber, each user I think gets 100 gigabytes of email storage space. So I'm not gonna say you can't fill it up, but I'm gonna say you're gonna have to try. And I expect that unless you are ridiculously atypical, Microsoft or Google, either one you're using, will increase the storage available to you faster than you can fill it up. So I'm kind of a pack rat. The number of times I've actually gone back, not so many, but I don't feel like you have to delete, but I do feel like it needs to be out of the inbox. Save attachments separately. Again, I think that goes to creating an accurate and honest client record. If you're saving an email into your document management system or into your practice management system, those add-ins will grab the attachments. If you save it as a PDF with the right settings, and if you need help with that, again, set up one of the advisor calls, it will grab the attachment in its native format. So if you've got an email with a Word document attached, it saves that document inside the PDF as a Word document. I would still generally save them separately, simply because you don't have to remember that the proposed contract is inside the email that is, regarding revised contract, et cetera, et cetera. You want to just go and you go see the Word document, it says contract, you open it, you're done. And if you're still printing emails, unless they are for the specific and limited purpose of, wanting to refer to it for some reason, I wouldn't print it to just have it. There are very few emails that I print anymore. And especially with mobile devices, there are a few, like if I've got, instructions, or if I'm going someplace that I need or think, cell phone access might be a problem and there isn't Wi-Fi, there are a few that I would print there. But as a general rule, I'd like to think, you're diminishing or maybe have even eliminated your reliance on paper files. I still use paper as a working medium, no opposition to paper, but when I'm done, whatever I'm done with it, if I've made any changes, I scan it in, so I get the record. That record is my proof, and the paper goes in the recycling. Let's talk about a few add-ins that maybe might, if you feel like Outlook is missing something for you, I want to make you aware of a couple things out there. One is Sperry Software. They have like 33 different email add-ins for Outlook. This is specific to Outlook. So if you've got some problem with Outlook and you think, God, I bet I'm not the only one who has this problem. If someone has written a solution to it, it's quite possibly in one of these 33 that Sperry will happily sell you. A couple up there, Zoom email windows. So if you found that when you open an email, the size of the fonts keep changing, not in the sense that, somebody's done like a pretty email and, it's all stylized, but in the sense that sometimes you open it and the normal text is too small and sometimes it's too big. They've got a $20 add-in for that. One that I think is particularly useful and which Outlook has tried to solve in a different way, but hasn't done great on, is a reply to all monitor. So if you hit reply all, this thing will pop up and say, "Did you really mean to reply all?" So that's usually helpful. And then the programs themselves, Outlook and Gmail, have gotten better at detecting, like if you say, I've attached, the slides for today's webinar, and you didn't actually attach anything, they're generally getting smart enough to say, "Hey, did you want to attach something?" But I don't think they've gotten to this point where they're gonna, preemptive or like, put a gate check on you for replying to all. A few others, and these all have some trial period, but then they will be looking for money. Quick file. So if you want to file into folders, but you want to be able to do it a little bit faster and a little bit easier, this is something to take a look at. It works with all the modern versions of Outlook for Windows. You see there 365 all the way back to 2016. And it is better than, click and drag. Essentially, it gives you like a right click functionality. So it's a little bit smoother and does some suggestive options. But again, that's going to put it in a folder in the email, which unless you give other people access to your email, you're the only one that's seeing it. So I don't think that's the best solution unless you are a true solo. I mean, you could combine this with something else if you wanted to file the email in Outlook and then also have it in the document management system or the practice management system or whatever, but not the best for multi-user firms. SaneBox is something that Outlook has integrated some of these features that made SaneBox famous, but SaneBox has, of course, added more, and SaneBox works with more than just Outlook. So you'll see up there, if you happen to still be using AOL Mail for some reason, it'll work with that. It'll work with Yahoo. The middle one there is Fastmail. That's what I use for my personal email. And then it obviously works on Mac, Outlook for Windows, and Gmail. So what it does is it lets you say, remind me about this email later, or, pause this for a while, or pop this up, a week from Tuesday, that sort of things. And that way, the email essentially reappears as at the top of your inbox at whatever schedule you tell SaneBox to do that. It wouldn't be a legal presentation in 2023 or 2024 if I didn't say that there was something AI powered that you could do. So in addition to some of the Copilot functionality, there are third parties that are building AI-based tools and into their add-ins for Outlook. And so Simplifile is another example of one of these filing tools. This one promises to give you better suggestions because, of course, it's better. It uses AI. I expect, honestly, the other one probably does too if it makes suggestions. It just doesn't blare AI across the heading. So this is another one to look at if you were kind of tempted by QuickFile. I would put QuickFile on your list, and I would put Simplifile, look at them both, see if one meets your needs better than the other. But again, these two are about getting the email out of the inbox into a folder in Outlook. But again, a folder in Outlook is only something you can see, or somebody you've delegated who has access to your email. There are a few calendar add-ins. Most of these I expect you've probably used. If you're on a 365 subscription, you almost certainly at least have the web meeting version of Teams. You might not be able to make phone calls, like traditional phone calls with Teams, but you almost certainly have the web meeting version. So you can make any calendar appointment a Teams meeting. Obviously, Zoom has an add-in as well. At our company, we use a mixture of the two. So internal things are done on Teams, and so we make Teams meetings for those through Outlook. External things are almost always done on Zoom, so we make Zoom meetings for those. And so I've used both these add-ins. There's also, if you are using one of the scheduling tools like Calendly, for example, to suggest times or offer people access to your calendar so you don't have to go back and forth with 10 emails to schedule something, they have an Outlook add-in as well. I'm not sure if they have a Gmail add-in or not. Let's talk a little bit about what's coming down the pike or what is already here for Mac users on what Outlook's going to look like is available now, but will become the default in a little bit of time. And I think Microsoft still hopes to sunset the full like classic Outlook, I want to say by 2029. So you get a few years. But let's get an idea of what's coming down and what's here now. So this looks dramatically different than your traditional Outlook. You'll see you get one row, you still have the ribbon. So let me move, you still get the ribbon there, and you've got this one row of buttons instead of large icons and some small icons and a whole bunch of stuff down the side. You see, you've had the side pane before, but they've simplified it quite a bit. And we've got more than a few Copilot buttons going on here. So let's take a look at each one of these in turn. So a couple of different things you can do. If you open up Outlook now, you probably have a switch on the top right to switch to new Outlook or classic Outlook. So you can switch back and forth between the two. That way you can see what the new one looks like, try it for a while, see if it fits your needs, see if you absolutely hate it and hope it goes away. But once you switch to the new Outlook, you can then do the classic ribbon, which you see here, or let me flip back a slide. The other option would be the simple ribbon. So this is our simplified ribbon, which is what I use most of the time. This is the classic ribbon. It's bigger, it's got words, it shows a few more things, and it looks more like what classic Outlook looks like. So that's an option. So once you switch to new Outlook, you can then engage the classic ribbon, and so it'll make you feel a little bit more at home. Another feature that we have going on here, let me move my little window out of the way, is that's where they've moved settings. So traditionally Outlook settings are on the top left, and you could go in there and change a whole bunch of things. Now it's a sprocket at the top right. This matches what looks like on the web view. So if you go into the web view of Outlook, or you've done that in the past, you'll notice that they have that little gear or sprocket, and that's what they've done on desktop now. And they've added to do. It has replaced our traditional Outlook tasks. So there's that blue check mark. That means you'd be using Microsoft To Do as opposed to Outlook tasks. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then they have these panels on the right. They've had them for a while, but they've added, they've got calendar, and then again, they've got To Do. So instead of tasks on the side pane, you've got the To Do panel. And then if you're somebody who likes to have multiple Outlook windows open, you now right click on the function that you want to open. So it was traditionally that you could do, just keyboard shortcut or some other option to get a new window. You're right clicking and it kind of pops out. And then of course, last, but certainly not least, and definitely most expensive, there are a lot of ways that you can use Microsoft's Copilot AI in the new Outlook. You could click on it on the top right. You could click on it in an email message. You could even click on it on the left pane between your calendar and your contacts. So lots of ways. Those don't necessarily appear unless you've paid Microsoft the $20 to $30 per user per month for access to Copilot. If you are a big fan of the view settings in Outlook, you're going to find these dramatically slimmed down in the new version. They are still there, but they're not anywhere near as feature rich. So we used to do several slides on what you could change in the view, but a lot of those options have gone away. So if you've heavily customized your Outlook view, try it in the new Outlook and see what's tolerable. And if something's not, send Microsoft feedback, because one of the things that they've done very recently, I want to say in the last couple of months, maybe even more recently that, is that their original strategy was not to make Copilot available on Classic Outlook at all. And then they got a lot of pushback on that. So now Copilot is available both on the new Outlook and the Classic Outlook. So they are open to change on the new Outlook. One of the things that I mentioned with SaneBox is that you can snooze emails until later. Microsoft has built some of that functionality into Outlook. In the new Outlook, here is how you do it. You got an email message open, click that little clock face, and then you can say, when do you want to be reminded of this email? You got the ability to pin emails, which is something I do all the time, especially for upcoming engagements, so that they're always at the top. And if it's got the details that I want, it's easy to find. And also flagging. If you flag an email in Outlook and you're using To Do, any flagged email in Outlook shows up automatically in a flagged category in To Do. So that is a super easy way to get tasks or email tasks, at least, into a To Do program to track it, so that you've got one place to go, hopefully a little bit less stress. I mentioned earlier that I would be a little bit disappointed if anybody still has the little bong or bing or bop that plays when you get an email, because I think that person would long ago have gone insane. If you want to turn off the other methods of notifications, they've changed how you do that in the new Outlook. So you're going to go to that sprocket at the top right, and then you hit General Notifications, and you can turn off all the notifications, or you can set it up so that it doesn't notify you unless it's people that you have favorited. So one of the things that we often hear when I talk about you shouldn't have email open all the time, it's like, there's somebody here who demands a response, within 5 minutes, or they think I'm dead and they come running down the hall. You could favorite that person, and then if that person sends you an email, you get the alert or the bing or the bong or whatever. But otherwise, Outlook stays silent and lets you just work on what you intended to work on. Avoid some of those distractions and those interruptions that take you away and reduce your productivity by 40%. Couple of things to also help you clean out the inbox. Again, showing this in new Outlook, create rules. So the example I used last week that you see on the slide is that if I get an email from the Illinois State Bar, meaning that I've defined the condition as being their domain there under that second step, I have that marked with high importance. So then, it puts that little emergency or exclamation point flag and makes it prominent. You can, instead of making it prominent, you could have it automatically filed. You could have any number of other things happen. Nice thing about this is that if you've been using Outlook long enough, you might remember a day when these rules would only run if Outlook were open. Now these rules are stored on the server. So these rules apply if you open Outlook or the Apple Mail client on your iPhone, for example. These rules are running on the server, so they're affecting it no matter where you're looking at email. Quick steps. This is what I would suggest if you are frugal and you don't want to buy one of those filing programs, but you do want to do the filing method of how you're going to, clean out the inbox. You can create, essentially, it's kind of like a macro, but Outlook calls it quick step. So you give it a name, you tell it what you want it to do, and then it appears in this little home ribbon as possible options. So I said file to complement. So if somebody sends something and says something nice about me, I can just go to the home ribbon and I hit file to complement, and it goes to that particular inbox or that particular folder. It's a little bit faster than, clicking and holding and dragging. And that way it's kind of a nice way to clean out the inbox. And I'm not paying, for one of those other add-ons. But again, multi-user firms, I would suggest you do the practice management system, you do the document management system, or you do the PDF route. Make sure it's available to folks wherever. If you need to declare email bankruptcy, if you are that person with 100,000 emails in your inbox and you're like, I don't remember what most of these are, and so you're going to pick a day, say a month ago, and everything before a month ago is just going to go away. And honestly, if someone wanted it, and they can send it again, I suppose. So you do a search of the inbox for everything up to a certain date. It'll give you that list, and then you can select all or select the ones that you want and go ahead and just delete it. I think that's perfectly fine, especially if you've got, thousands of unread emails. You might as well at least start over, give yourself a clean slate after going through this. And then a couple of things getting these things out of your inbox. You can drag two emails from the inbox to that to-do bar on the right or to the app icon on the left, turns it into a task, puts it into do, and then you can either delete the email if you're confident on that, or if you can do what I do, which is just go ahead and archive it and not have to see it again. You can also drag to the calendar as well. So if you got something that says we're going to meet next Thursday and it's just internal meeting, so there's no Zoom or anything, drag that. It'll put whatever's attached to the email as well as the text of the email in the description of the appointment. I use categories to identify, particularly on the calendar, but also a little bit on email, who it's from or what I want to do with it or what I need to act on it. Frankly, I find these more helpful on the calendar because it color codes it, but you can categorize emails as well. And then one of the last things I want to talk about is if you've got email addresses in your autocomplete that you don't need anymore, just start typing that person or that email, and then you can hit the X and get rid of it. There are a few more notes on speed keys, and if you're a keyboard maven, take a look at the slides. Last thing, as far as making sure that you do email efficiently, and this is described in detail in the written materials, 4 Ds. You touch an email, you're going to do something with it, and then you don't have to touch it a second time. So do it, delegate it, delete it, or delay it. Delay it, put it on that task list we talked about. Turn it back over to Paul to close us out.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for all that great information. Hopefully, we'll make everybody more organized and more productive. Jeff, at several points, mentioned Microsoft Copilot, and the VBA is the leader in AI education for Virginia lawyers. Our next PMA webinar is going to be about Copilot. It's entitled All In on AI, Microsoft's Brave New World. And you'll find out what Microsoft is doing to transform law firms and law practice. That program is going to be scheduled for December the 11th at 12 noon. So mark your calendars, come to vba.org to register, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Jeff, many thanks as always, and I hope everybody has a great afternoon.